Hello, and welcome to Radio NIGP. We're still celebrating the new year as January has flown by and time refuses to slow down. What new plans do you have for 2025 in your day-to-day business? We continue to look at formulating your own plans for the future. This episode also features two new segments with focuses on AI as well as leadership. So grab your drink of choice, sit back and enjoy this episode of Radio NIGP.
Well, hello and welcome to a new segment here at Radio NIGP that we're calling Grim Tales. Stories about how we were first introduced or moments with Rick Grimm that had an impact on our lives.
Thank you, Victor. This segment recognizes that Mr. Grimm, currently as CEO, will be moving on after this year. I mean, he'll still be here, but he is choosing to step down from the CEO position. And so it's our opportunity to share what an amazing collaborator, creator, innovator that he is. I would be very surprised if you haven't met him yet. I've known Rick Grimm since 1999, and I got more involved in NIGP because of his method of engaging people. My Rick Grimm story is actually fairly recent. In June of 2024, I had the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Grimm about our new education certification and being recognized in our education program, professional development pathways. And he talked about what it took to lift this NIGP CPP certification and how it would critically assist the membership in achieving their goals. And if you haven't seen it already, please watch the June episode or the June broadcast of Radio NIGP because it's the first thing. And it is just a complete demonstration of Mr. Grimm's extraordinary knowledge, passion, and strategies to evolutionize our profession and our institute.
Here's my story about Rick Grimm, and it's fairly recent. Last year, 2024, I had the honor of being named the Albert H. Hall Fellow of NIGP. And Rick, if you've ever received that award or any of the other major awards with NIGP, Rick does have an interesting way of letting you know about the awards. And one thing Rick didn't like to just send a note or an email or something like that. No, he liked to let you know in person. And so he would create a premise to talk to you. And mine was, I thought, a little humorous anyway. I remember I was at the 2024 meeting of the Florida Association of Public Procurement Officials, FAPO, in Orlando. And at the time, my city commission was working on an award for our solid waste contract. And I needed to watch that because I couldn't be in the chambers in person that day. So I was sitting out in the lobby watching my commission talk about the first reading of that particular ordinance. And I remember Rick Grimm came by and said, "Hey, how are you doing?" And he was on his way out of the area. He was leaving, and he came up and said, we need to get together and talk about how that award went. We understand you're retiring, and I just need to know all about that." So a couple of months later, he called, and he after a quick email said, "We do need to get together. Let's pick a time to do that." So we did, and on a Friday morning, I remember I joined Rick for the Zoom meeting, and during the Zoom meeting, he started first talking about, well, how did your contract award go for solid waste? And what are your plans for retirement? And then he asked me, if you had to look back at your life, who would you want to have around you at any particular time? So I gave him a couple of names. And he says, well, that's great because congratulations, you're the Albert Hall Award winner this year. And only Rick could do that well. And that's one thing I always remember. Everything was polished. Everything had a purpose. And Rick always cared.
So here's my story, and it's not a story because I can't think of one story to tell. Rick Grimm is a companion, a co-conspirator, a brother, so many things to me. We've been conspiring to make this profession better, and he's been leading the way in so many special ways over the last 30 years that all I can say is that we have been made better because he's been here, and we will be less when he leaves. He is a great friend. He's always been there, whether it's staying at his house when I went to my first baseball all-star game, or meeting up in Yellowstone National Park, or spending all the hours trying to hammer through creating a new certification for the profession. He's always there, always friendly, always helpful, always insightful, and always brings the best there is to whatever problem we're dealing with.
Years ago, it was, yeah, there might be Canadian members, but the US membership was kind of, oh, you're Canadian, right? And the Canadian side were, well, why would I take that class? Because it's all US legislation. Like, that means nothing to me. So why should I bother? That has changed. And I've had students in class that don't have educational offerings from wherever they're sitting, and they come to our classes. So, it's it's bigger, I think, than a lot of people realize.
Yeah, I think Mike can attest to better than any one of us that Rick has had a global perspective and just not a local perspective.
The big difference is Rick is in a position, and he's of the mindset where he thinks about what the boots on the ground and the membership need, as well as what the board is trying to do.
Right.
So there's the politics, and then there's the operational reality. And he's got one foot planted in each. So he bridges that gap. He does it very well.
Don, when did you first meet Rick?
Have no clue.
That organic?
It's been so long.
I'm guessing it was when I got on the UPPCC originally, but I don't recall. Mid 1990s, I guess. Because I spent the 80s in MAGPA and working in the local chapter, spent the 90s working with NASPO, at which time they put me on, I think after I was finished being president of NASPO in, I think, 96, I think they put me on, or I put myself on the UPPCC. And that's probably when I first met Rick. As far as stories about Rick, memories of Rick, there's so many of them. One of them is when I was on the executive committee, which was what used to be the president, first vice president, second vice president, third vice president, he sent each of us a book on organizational leadership, volunteer organization leadership. And we read that book, and then we all were at a conference in San Diego for volunteer organization leadership. In later years, it was just the president and Rick that went, but that year, all of us went. And that's where Rick planted the seed of NIGP 2.0. Of course, same year, Philadelphia, he and my wife, Kim, and my son, Keaton, and I went across, I think it was across the street. It was very close by that market that had all the restaurants and food, and it was just wonderful. We sat down and just had a Philly cheesesteak sandwich together, and again, talked and got to know each other. Since then, I mean, he was at MAGPA a couple of years ago, and Kim and I was down there teaching a class, so Kim came with me, and we went out to dinner both nights with Rick, just because we're friends and family. I know each of us feel a closeness to Rick, and for me, it's hard for me to understand how he does it. He's just so amazing because everybody he meets feels like they're his best friend.
Yep.
And he's just got a way about him that makes you feel like he's your best friend, but also at the same time, the seeds he's dropped along the way for the board to make decisions. I mean, Mike, you were on the board when the decision was made to start the CPP,
Right. And 2.0. I was on the 2.0.
Yeah, and 2.0, yeah. But, I was on the UPPCC at that time.
I know.
And it was, as you probably know, it was driving me crazy because we weren't doing anything. And Rick just kept telling me, Don, be patient, be patient. But I'd be willing to bet, I wasn't on the board, but I'd be willing to bet he had a little bit to do with helping to drive that decision. I know the board members were strong on that, but I don't think I think the initial seeds, I feel like Rick planted a lot of those. And that's why NIGP is where it is today, I think, because of his leadership and his friendship to everybody. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't have one story. I have multiple stories, and I could probably keep going.
And I'm sure you've all, as I have, received periodic notes from him. And it's not just, he might add a written continue to be brilliant or whatever, but these are relevant, observant, and meaningful.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the thing about Rick. He forms a vision, and the vision is long-term, way out, and then he figures out what needs to be done to make it happen. Whereas a lot of people, their vision goes to the next step, nothing beyond that. And it like that forward sight is just, it's him.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to think about it. He just automatically does it. He's not thinking next week, next month, next year. He's thinking 20 years from now. What do we want to be when we grow up, and how do we get there? Well, everyone, here's a few musings from colleagues who've known Rick for a number of years, but there's more to come. I'm going to be doing my own session in my relationship with Rick, maybe from a little more international perspective, since I am Canadian. And we've had some discussions over the years about differences in educational content and some other things, but also a deep relationship on how we move the profession forward. So stay tuned for the next sessions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kirk Buffington with RadioNIGP and part of the Legally Speaking team. This month, I'm bringing you a discussion about the importance of words. And this comes about after a particular post on a couple of our NSITE communities gained some traction and a lot of responses. And that post was regarding the importance when we have an RFP or an ITB, how important it is to maintain consistent language throughout the solicitation. If it's an RFP, you call it proposals, proposal response, proposal submittal. You don't say as part of an RFP, bid response. Conversely, with an ITB, it's a bid response. It's a bid solicitation. It happens, in my opinion, we have these great templates, but we sometimes forget that we need to take a good look at our templates and how we're using them, making sure that we have an RFP template that is specific to RFP. We're not using a template that is interchangeable between RFP, ITB, RFQ, RFQU, all of those acronyms that we like to use in procurement. So I took a look at this after I saw the postings and the responses on the Insight communities. And I thought I would take a look both at some academic research and both at, of course, case law, because that is my thing, case law. It's precision and language. It's not just a best practice. It's a legal obligation and a legal necessity. We will win or lose protests based on the specific language that we use in our solicitations. I think we all understand the distinction between an RFP and an ITB. RFP, we're trying to achieve best value for our agency. ITB, all things being equal in our bid responses, then we're going to award to the lowest responsible bidder. Fundamentally, confusion exists and misapplication occurs when we use these terms interchangeably. Misleading a solicitation or blurring the lines between these procurement methods can result in bidder confusion, unfair competition, and delays in your solicitation. It's important to understand the consistency. So I did find actually 4 cases that address language in general, not necessarily on point with RFP language versus ITB language, but how important it is to have appropriate, consistent language in our solicitations. Now, I'm not going to go through and discuss those 4 cases in this very brief dialogue. I am actually preparing a legally speaking post. As you may know, I author the monthly legally speaking column that's available through NIGP as members. And I will be preparing a monthly post discussing this very topic and further discussion on the 4 cases. But what did we learn? What did I learn from those 4 cases and from other research that I did? Highlighting these 4 cases highlighted the risk of inconsistent solicitation language and the importance of clarity in how we complete our solicitation. So some key takeaways that I found: use of correct solicitation from the start. Are you sure? Is everybody committed to and is everybody on board with using the RFP or the ITB? And once that decision is made, you need to stay consistent throughout your process. We don't change when we open the bids or proposals and we then go to contract and we start negotiating our contract. We have to stay consistent with the solicitation that we use. Maintaining consistency in terminology. Be explicit about evaluation criteria. Obviously, in an ITB, we really don't go through an evaluation process except for the bidder's responsiveness and responsibility. We don't look at whether or not they have a strong financial capability. Those are things, if those are important to you, you put them in, you wrap it up in an RFP. Obviously, it's important to train staff. We are all suffering from the challenge in recruiting and retaining employees, particularly in the public sector procurement. So if you have new staff coming on board, particularly if they came from the private sector, and I've seen a lot of agencies, and I worked in the private sector. Private sector folks can bring a whole different look of doing things, and that's good. But they also have to understand that we don't have the latitude that we had in the private sector. I was a buyer for Walmart. I had a lot of leverage just being from Walmart. They were the 800-pound gorilla. So it's important that you train new staff as they come on board. We have a duty to ensure transparency, fairness, and compliance in every single solicitation. Misusing RFP and IFB terminology can create unnecessary confusion, invite legal scrutiny, and ultimately compromise public trust in our own process. By being precise in our language, adhering to best practices, and learning from legal precedents, professional procurement officials can minimize risk and ensure a smooth and efficient procurement process. With that said, I thank you all for listening. As I said, look out for my Legally Speaking column post that will probably be put up in the next month or two. And I look forward to hearing comments back from you on this Legally Speaking discussion today, or anything else with our Legally Speaking community. Thank you again. Again, Kirk Buffington, Radio NIGP. Have a great day.
Good morning, Radio NIGP. This is Brooke Smith. I am this city recorder from Murray City, and today we are talking about AI. And with me, I have Ted Phillips, Valerie Scott, and Kevin Yen. And what we want to talk about is the major changes that are happening. And one of the big announcements just recently was Sam Altman and OpenAI have introduced agents. Perplexity's released their agent. I believe Microsoft is talking about their agents. So a lot of things are happening. But with that, Harvard Business School has released a report saying that 12.2 people complete more tasks, or 12.2% more tasks are completed. 25% of the tasks are completed faster using AI, and then they produce 40% better work. So with me, I have our panel and our guest, and I want to turn the time over to them to talk about ways they've used AI and how it's increased efficiencies and made them better. So Ted, why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about what you're doing with AI?
Okay. So my name is Ted Phillips. I'm with Osceola County Procurement down in Kissimmee, Florida. And we have just started to scratch the surface on the use of AI. So I work very closely with our IT department. We have an enterprise license or access that we can use. And we are primarily focused on the use of ChatGPT. So we've established some certain rules, some ground rules that we are using on our test pool right now on if you run a question through AI, that you have to capture not just the answer, but you also have to capture the question as well. If you share that information, you have to share both the question and the answer as well. If you go through multiple questions, you have to share the entire thread, to get your answers. It's worked okay to an extent. I've not seen any major failures. I've seen a couple of areas where it could be improved, but a lot of that improvement actually focuses on one of the two tips that we have learned through this, and we've experienced it this way. And the first tip is be specific and be mindful of the question that you're asking. So the system is only going to respond to you based upon what you ask it to do. Now you have the opportunity to build on that as you're going through the question by asking additional questions or providing additional details. We preload a lot of our information in, and then we ask for comparative questions on how it complies with policy, procedures, statutes, or federal compliance. That's what I do a lot of work in. There's a new feature they've built into ChatGPT. Again, that's who we're mostly focused on, is where you can actually edit your question after you've asked the question. And a lot of people don't see that. It was something that was just brought out, where after you've asked the question and you see the answer, you go back to the question that you asked and you hover over it, and it puts a pencil to the left-hand side of the box. And you can actually go in and edit the question that you've asked and hit enter, and it actually will re-ask that same question again and give you possibly a different answer or a more detailed answer, that kind of thing. The other thing is check, as a second tip, is to always do your best, do due diligence on the answers that it gives you. I think Reagan said it the best, trust but verify, that kind of thing. That you always go back and check, and because it's going to give you the answer to what you're looking for, but based upon how you've asked the question, as well as what you have provided it for your background documentation. Again, like I said, we've loaded our policies, procedures, statutes, certain statutes that we work with, and of course, federal compliance rules. It can create, I would say, a bias, but it can actually skew the answer based upon the question you've asked. And so you always want to check and confirm as best you can that the information you're being given is it's most applicable, the best. Then, of course, you always have the opportunity to go, I'll forget that. toss it out. So
Right. Yeah, so important to upskill your own knowledge set too, to make sure that the information being received is correct. Valerie, what about you? How are you using AI and any tips and tricks for us?
Yeah, my favorite, most recent use of AI is the free version of Grammarly. And I use it to proofread emails and documents that I generate because I don't have someone just dedicated to proofreading my work. And I found that I spend less time scrutinizing my work and is this the right word? And did I phrase that correctly? And is this a proper, use of a semicolon, etc. And Grammarly quickly can do that for me. And it makes my emails better, makes them more clear, and it makes me spend less time trying to create a really good email to go out to like the organization. I also have toyed with ChatGPT. Our organization is kind of in the development stage of a policy around AI. So we've had a lot of good conversations, and my favorite guidance from my boss is treat AI like an intern. And it goes back to that trust but verify thing. Like, don't ask it a question you don't know the answer to. And also make sure you're double checking the work that you get back out of it. So I would echo all of what Ted said about being diligent and mindful of the way that we use the tool.
Yeah. To piggyback off of that, Valerie, the Grammarly is an extension that you put on your email and Word documents. But I also like that Grammarly sends you an email and says, hey, these are your common mistakes. And I feel like it's helped me become a better writer as I've used it for the past year or so. So yeah, great tool to use. So thank you for sharing that. And then Kevin, what about you? What's going on in California?
Oh my goodness. So we're pretty novice at this AI usage as well, and I'm working on trying to get us to do more of it. But in terms of time saving, I would say, and again, I'm just using right now I'm just using ChatGPT just in the free version, and I understand that their paid version is pretty inexpensive as well, and that's the next step that I want to take it to IT and ask them to approve doing that. But for right now, what I've done is used ChatGPT. I'll copy and a message, an email message, and put it in there and just say respond to this email, and then it shoots the response to it. Sometimes, and just like what Ted mentioned, at the so I'll read through the response, and then I may want a little bit more compassion, so I'll just put with more compassion, more empathy, um, more commitment, or whatever it might be, and it'll spit out a different response, and it's similar response but with whatever it is additional stuff that I'm asking it to do. And I really like that because it I could have written that myself, but it saves me time not having to think about what to put down. And recently, I know my kids are way more advanced on this than I am, but I thought, I'm just gonna put something in here to see if it could spit out a letter of interest for my son, who is a first year law student, and he's putting out his feelers. And so I thought, I'm going to throw this in here and see if and it gave me a really good response for a first year law student, right? Applying for an internship. And I thought, wow, this is actually very helpful. And I think the best part is that it does the initial work for you, right? So you won't have that writer's block like you used to, because you can get started with this with AI having to start for you. So, but for me, at work, the best part is just, or at least the time saving part is just having it respond. Or sometimes I'll write the letter or write the email and then I'll put it in there and just say, how does it sound? And it will tell me if it's clear, if it's concise, if it whatever opinion I don't know if it really has an opinion, but whatever terms that it wants to share with me, and that helps. And it always gives you a slightly different version to change it to for better clarity, for whatever it might be, and that's has been very helpful as well. But all of it is really about time saving. So.
Right. Yeah, and I like the fact that you pointed out that you've used it to change tone. So make it sound more professional, make it sound more
Yeah.
empathetic. You can give it different qualities and traits to help you convey what you're trying to say. So great suggestion, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was a quick recap of how AI can be used in your offices, and we wish you the best. Have a good day.
Right. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Radio NIGP. My name is Bobby Tolston and I'd like to welcome you to Deeper Dive Making a Splash. Our topic today is 2025 Readiness Early Activities. If you watched our show last month, you heard from several of the segments. One segment talked about looking ahead and planning your time off ahead of time. I think that's a great idea. When you put your strategic plan together for your procurements, if you're not injecting self-care into your plan, it's a plan that you're going to find yourself stressed out at the end. Make yourself that project summarily the way that you make your strategic plan your priority. Today I have with me Jody Jacoby and Stacy Gregg. Hello and welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Hello. I'm very well, excited to be here.
Thank you. I'd like to say that these are two ladies that I've worked with on multiple projects, and I have the utmost respect for both of them. So I asked you ladies a couple of questions in advance. So I'd like to start with you, Stacy. But before we start, Stacy, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
So there's not much to tell. I'm Stacy. I work at South Carolina State University. This is my second position in higher ed, and I love it. It's just that higher ed is a whole different animal than the rest of the world. And so our approach has to be different, right, with our stakeholders and everyone else. I've also worked in state procurement and for K-12, and it's something new every day to look forward to.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which means we need to do what? Inject self-care into our day, right?
We better.
We wear some very big hats and we have some big shoes to fill on a daily basis. And what makes our job so different is there are no 2 days the same, right? You leave work today, you have one project, you think you're almost done, and you get in and you have a flood of emails and you have to pivot very quickly. But understanding that our job is one that is high in demand, injecting self-care couldn't be more important now. So, Jody, first, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Bobby. I'm Jody Jacoby. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer for the Metropolitan Council in the Twin Cities, Minnesota. And our agency is responsible for regional planning. And we're basically a super county and lots of different essential services that we operate. And I lead a team of 36 amazing people. I've been at my agency now 18 years, and before that, spent 8 years at the Department of Transportation managing federal grants. So over 20 years in public service. Very, very proud to be a qualified public servant serving. In my free time, I have my side hustle, as I like to call it, is I teach yoga. I teach meditation and yoga, and have a really healthy practice myself, and really enjoy serving some of my yogis with practices.
Oh, wow. And that's how Jody and I have been connected at the hip lately, because I am a practicing yogi as well. Thank you. And I am actually taking an online class to become an instructor at some point. So that's one of my ways of injecting self-care into my personal regimen. One of the things I did this year, 2025, to get myself ready, I joined a health club. And the reason that I joined the health club was because I wanted to expand on my yoga practice. So now I go to the club twice a week for an hour. I also have taken up Zumba swim, where we go and work out in the pool, and I try to do that once every other week. So I am being very intentional about injecting self-care into my regimen for 2025. So Stacy, can you share with us what are some self-care tips that are easy to deploy?
Easy. Well,
Is relative, right?
you have to be very intentional, right? And
Yeah.
so I think the big thing is now what I'm working on now, beginning in in January, is paying attention to nutrition,
Mm.
because I have a tendency to suffer with inflammation. I've been like trying to switch over to a whole food diet because I find that my pain level is a lot smaller if I'm eating whole foods. So it's paying attention to your body and what it likes. And I'll tell anybody having um, provided care to people with cancer, a lot of times what happens with our bodies can be controlled by what we eat. It's just a level of discipline that we have to undertake in order to take care of ourselves. So that's good. And also sleeping is another one, or resting. And my big thing is YouTube and finding mindfulness videos on YouTube, which actually work. That's something that I picked up during the pandemic and I've kept it going.
Wow. Thank you, Stacy, for sharing. And this year, one of my goals is to be more self-aware. And being more self-aware, it gives me a greater opportunity to inject self-care by being intentional about it. Now I've learned a new word that may not be new to everyone, but critical reflection. It's a lot deeper than just surface. So, what I'm suggesting as part of this new year and injecting self care is take time during your day to do some critical reflection. Put that on your calendar, make that a priority. I used to say, once I get home, well, by the time I get home, I'm really too tired to do anything. So I think going forward, putting it in my plan, maybe the last hour of my day, the last half hour of my day, just giving myself an opportunity to decompress before I get home and take all of that maybe unwanted energy home. So, Jody, can you tell us what are some ideas that we could perhaps use with our staff to help them to be more intentional about their self-care?
Great question, and very, very important as we're moving into uncertainty, right? A lot of uncertainty nationally, uncertainty at our agencies. And as you mentioned, Bobby, like one of the exciting and sometimes frustrating things about working in procurement is you come into the office thinking you're going to have, a very regimented day, and it tends to be like dumpster fire to dumpster fire, or different things that you need to bring to your job, which is also really exciting to be able to come to work and learn and help. And what I am finding is if I need it, and I do need it, and that's self-reflection, and as Stacy talked about, good nutrition, bringing nutritional things in for my staff too, not just the cookies, but thinking about fruit, thinking about cheeses and just different nutritional needs, and then spending some time actually talking to staff. spending time thinking about my day and the meetings, that I'm prepared, and that I also have a break in between. The meeting doesn't need to last an hour. It's important to have pre-work. Then maybe the meetings can go faster. There's lots of small things to do to be able to, as a leader, not only show up for ourselves with that so essential self-care, but to be ready to show up for our staff, to lead them in a way that empowers them, that embeds their passion, and with our work, ensure that it's clarity for the very important staff doing the work. We always say in our department, it's people first, process, and then the system. But you always start with your people.
Yes. Thank you so much for that, Jody, because we can get so caught up in our day to day that we look at people as a tool, right? And not as an asset, but as a resource. We have to change how we see the people that work with us. First, we say work with us and not for us, because someone working for you is kind of demeaning and diminishing, right? So to empower them, one of the things that I did, we did a retreat where we just took the afternoon off. We left work, we left phones, everything. We notified our end users in advance that we would not be available. That was so empowering for my staff, for them to really see that I cared about them as human beings, right? Because when you look at people as people, you can see when they're hurting. You can see when they're not connected. You can see when they're, struggling. That's when you have a relationship with your staff. So, Stacy, how can we be intentional about self-care at work?
So some of the things I do is, number one, I try to lead by example, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And put some things in place for them. I've had teammates, I like you, I call them teammates. And I say that we work together because at the end of the day, from my first day here to now, I say that, we're all in this together. I remind them that all the time. Either we're going to rise or we're going to sink, but we're going to do it together, and we're going to step in to those spaces that need extra attention, because anything can happen. So I've had, in a span of a year, I've had an employee lose his grandfather, lose his father, and be in a terrible car accident. And so the thing is, to me, is having those tough conversations, because sometimes men don't want to hear it, about, do you need to be taking advantage of our employee assistance program? And let me give you the name of a good therapist. And because you've experienced all this trauma, and if you don't address it, then it's just going to keep manifesting and growing. And there were times when I had to pull team members out and say, listen, I see that you're not yourself. What can I do to support you so that you can get back to yourself? Because I've seen all the way down this road, and I know that the direction that you're heading in is not going to be good for you. Because I work on a higher ed campus, I have the luxury of times when half the campus is not here, right? So students aren't here, faculty's not here. In those instances, we always take a day to cook something on the grill, fry fish, anything like that, in order to build some camaraderie amongst our team members, anything like that. And I have had them to, last February, in fact, it's time for me to do it again. Everybody, during 1 week, everybody take a day off. If they promised me they would spend the day taking care of themselves, and I didn't have them use their leave. I just told them that was a secret between them and me.
Stacy, oh my gosh. What you just demonstrated to me is the difference between a boss and a leader. Anybody can be a boss, but not everybody can be a leader. That was a big move. And I appreciate both you ladies, both of your input and ways of helping us to inject self-care into our daily routines. We're going to end this conversation for this segment, but I'd like to invite you ladies back for my next segment because I believe that this conversation is very important and that we should continue the conversation with giving some more tools and tips on how people can inject self-care into their 2025 readiness plan. Before we end, are there, excuse me, Stacy, can you give us some closing remarks?
I want to say thank you for having me here, especially in honor being here with my friend Jody, because I do consider her the guru of all of this. And so just thank you for including me. And it's just so nice to see the two of you together, and Happy New Year and all of that. And I can't wait to see how we all take care of each other by the end of the year.
Thank you so much, Stacy. And you will be getting another invitation. You're not getting off that easy. I'll see you again. Thank you. Jody, any final words from you?
It's a great honor to work in this profession, and it's a great honor to be a part of this and really to lead with other inspiring people that help us all be better. And Bobby, you mentioning taking care of yourself first is so important, so you can show up as your best for your team, for your work. And that's where that passion, that's where that commitment, that's where that power in our staff, in our people grows, and that love grows, and that willingness and interest to do better, to be better, and to show up just continues to manifest. So as much as ever, I think it's not just important, but it's essential that we pause and look at what is the environment we're creating. How are we demonstrating some of those principles? Are we taking time off when we didn't get a good night's sleep? Instead of reacting, are you saying to your staff, like, I didn't sleep well last night. I'm going to take 2 hours off. Can someone cover me? Leading by example like that, vulnerably, but being in action is really important. And it's the difference. It's the legacy. It's the environment that I not only need, but I think it's important for all of us to lean in and lead that way.
Oh my goodness. Great way to close. I look forward to seeing you ladies back here again real soon. And I want to say thank you, Radio NIGP, for giving us the opportunity to spread this word amongst the membership, because I know we all need an opportunity to inject self-care into our daily routines. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you back here again real soon. Take care. Bye.
Hey procurement family, today I'm very excited because I get a chance to introduce a brand new Radio NIGP segment, and we're talking all things leadership. We're going to talk about communication, succession planning, leadership development, salary negotiations. We're going to talk about it all. We're going to interview some amazing procurement professionals, all in hopes that their experience could potentially help you in your leadership journey. For the first segment, you guys get me. So here are a few tips that I think could be helpful in your leadership journey. All right, so tip number 1, practice on providing autonomy. You'll be very surprised at the results you get when you empower people and you give them the latitude to do things in their way. I know as procurement professionals, we're very technical, and sometimes we have the tendency to micromanage. But when you transition into the leadership role, it's no longer about being great at that solicitation. Now it's taking care of the people who are doing the solicitations. So what I would encourage everyone to do is practice on giving employees the space that they need and the encouragement to figure things out on their own. And you'd be very surprised at what that would do for them. So tip number 1, practice on providing autonomy. All right, so tip number 2 comes from an interview that I saw with Jeff Bezos years ago, and he said something that always stuck with me. He said, you must create an environment where the most junior person in the room feels comfortable enough at bringing ideas to the table. And what he said is that initially in his Amazon meetings, he would always go first. And he started to notice in the room that people would be apprehensive in bringing ideas. So he changed his approach and he started to speak last. And I think what that says is that we always have to be cognizant and create a culture where anybody can provide an idea. And we have to support that. So tip number 2 is to make sure you have an environment where the most junior person can bring an idea and is supported and not shunned. All right, guys, I hope you found that helpful. Be sure to tune in to more segments, and we're going to talk about leadership development the entire year.
Hello, and welcome to Construction Junction. I'm Christy Varda, and with me I have one of our friends from Florida. Ted, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Ted Phillips. I'm the Procurement Services Manager for Osceola County, Florida, right in the heart of the state.
Welcome. I really appreciate your time today, Ted. So what we wanted to talk with everyone about is the complexity of developing those schedules or developing construction procurement schedules and the challenges we may face, in building those schedules or even getting something out. So Ted and I were talking a little about some of the environmental challenges that we may have. For instance, I have 3 species of bats in where I work, that if we find that there's bat habitats in the area for clearing trees, we have certain times of the year that we're not allowed to clear those trees due to the fact those bat habitats are there. And what environmental challenges did you mention when we were talking?
Well, most of the more common environmental challenges that we've experienced have been involved in the skinks that we have in Florida and for gopher tortoises. And usually there's a suspicion, at the time that they are getting ready to complete the final design for a fire station, for example. And while they're working with the construction manager at risk, they'll need to go through those environmental studies, and that can slow things down. But of course, they're required environmentally. So
Exactly. Well, see, then I have to buy. So we are in a watershed area too. So we have to go through a separate procurement process to obtain credits, environmental credits to be able to build in certain areas. So,
right.
and depending on which one depends on when it's available. I just found out stream credits are extremely difficult to procure. In fact, I had to put the solicitation out twice because they weren't available when I put it out the first time. So those little things that take place that you have to consider when you're initially starting talking about a construction procurement. As many people may know, and if you don't, construction procurements involve multiple solicitations. For example, most of us, depending on your construction delivery method, whether you're doing design bid build, construction management risk, or design build, will depend on how you're procuring those and how many different procurements you need to do to be able to set those in place. Ted, where I'm at, when we're doing construction management at risk, we can hire the A&E firm to do that, but we have to have our construction contractor on board before that A&E reaches the end of schematic design. What's it for you like down there in Florida?
Actually, well, I can use one right now that I can think of. We hired an A&E firm to do our fire station prototype designs. So we did this, I think it was around 2020, and we're using a firm over on the West Coast of Florida. No, sorry, East Coast of Florida. And they developed our 2-bay, 3-bay, and 4-bay fire stations. And we hired them, brought them in, and then we paid them a reuse fee for the 2-bay, 3-bay, or 4-bay fire stations. And from there, we will actually do a separate solicitation for the construction manager at risk for individual fire stations. And I've been lucky enough, I can only think of one instance out of the 14 that I have done over the last several years where we actually hired a CMA at risk to build one fire station. We've done solicitations that usually include 2. I've had one that includes 3 different fire stations, and we ended up doing a solicitation to hire a CMA at risk for each one of those fire stations. So they're all proceeding on an alternate schedule, but they're all going through at the same time. So because we've already got our design done, the changes that they're going to make is going to be site specific. And so they will pay the reuse fee, the site specific design for those stations, but then they'll have the CM at risk brought in to help them finish out the design and any challenges that they may have concerning, anything related to drainage. If there's concerns about drainage, of course, the environmental concerns, traffic signals, those kinds of things. But usually they will work together at the same time.
That's great. Well, and that's one of the benefits of CM at risk or design build. When you're having a design build firm just go out, you do one solicitation and they go and they do the work. Another challenge I've found with some of ours. So unfortunately, we don't have prototypes for our fire stations. So another challenge I see sometimes is, the people that are supposed to be reviewing the specs and plans before we put them out on a bid, maybe missing a lot of stuff and getting a lot of questions. For instance, we just had a procurement where we got over 100 questions on one building that we're building. What experience have you had doing that? Because that does delay the schedule, because you have to answer the questions and give suppliers time to be able to redo their quotes from their subcontractors and such to be able to submit a bid. Have you seen that before in any of your procurements?
No, and the two major ones that we've done, of course, the fire station prototype, and the solicitation we did for the expansion of our semiconductor manufacturing facility. I can't think we got more than 10 questions, but that was only specifically on site conditions and not on the actual work itself. We had more questions concerning the design of an ancillary building at our semiconductor manufacturing facility instead of, issues concerning the specifications or the scope that they had put together for that.
Man, sometimes, okay, well, I typically say I never want to do procurement in Florida because of your sunshine laws. I'm really starting to think construction procurement might be easier down there instead of where I'm at.
It seems to be quite
Virginia.
easy. Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, coordinating these schedules. I mean, and so so when I came back from vacation this year, I was told, hey, by the way, this project that we said was CMAR, then we said wasn't CMAR, we're going to do CMAR. Can you put us together a schedule with all the different procurements we're going to have to do? And I had multiple columns going there. I had one that was the pre-qualification for the CMAR, and then once that was done, sending that RFP out to those pre-qualified. And then on the next column, I had for our construction support services that we use for a lot of the, engineering and inspection services that we do, that takes place, that third-party testing kind of group. And had them laid out and said, okay, guys, here's the best we can do. And that's dependent on getting everything through all of the legal approvals and getting everything back to us in a timely fashion. And people are surprised about how much procurement takes place in a construction contract versus, say, a contract for IT implementation. What experience have you had with those challenging schedules?
I'm assuming, based on the scenario that you just laid out, ours must be a lot easier to work with. Usually I will have an idea of when the department, our facilities, our construction department, needs to have a project underway. And they usually will tell me they want to take an item to the board by a specific date, because these have to be approved by our Board of County Commissioners because they exceed our county manager's threshold. And then I can work the process backwards. On a fire station, they're already working with a design firm because we have them on contract. So I will build it backwards from when they want to get it to the board to try to figure out when I need to get this thing, the commencement of negotiations, approved at that board meeting, and then working my solicitation schedule out backwards so that I have a general idea of when I'm going to release it. The department may ask me, they may not. It just depends on where they are in the process. If they can, get an idea of the schedule when we're going to have our pre-proposal meetings, and usually that's one of the inputs that I get from the department on whether or not on a qualification-based solicitation they want to have a conversation with anybody who's interested. And then, of course, we make those non-mandatory because our mandatory does restrict competition.
Yes.
And usually I'll have these things done sometimes months in advance. The biggest thing is just getting the commencement of negotiation approved so they can start negotiations with the CMIT risk, but trying to nail those backwards so that I have a general idea of when I need to release the solicitation to get them underway.
Yeah. So many times when I'm teaching NIGP courses, we talk about start with the end in mind and work your way backwards, whether you're building a solicitation or building a procurement schedule. And we try to do the same things, except when projects like this one where, well, we've changed our mind again, or we've done this again. So now we got to add it back to your workload. Well, Ted, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I hope you have beautiful weather down there in Florida. It might actually reach 40 degrees here in Virginia today, so we're excited. But I want to thank you so much, and I want to tell everyone thank you for viewing, and we'll see you next time at Construction Junction.
Not a problem. All right then.
Hello, friends. I hope that today's broadcast has both challenged and excited you. With 2 new segments and fresh perspectives, we hope you will continue to join in each month and will share with others the value of Radio NIGP. But can you believe we're already in February? Time is flying by, and for some of us, our plans to carry new habits into 2025 started strong, but we might be feeling like this is not possible to sustain. Bless our hearts, it can be hard to turn our best plans into sustainable action. I would just encourage you to keep going. You've got this. If it was important enough for you to start, it is important enough for you to continue. For others, you have hit the ground running in 2025 and you are gaining momentum. Let's just take a moment to celebrate with you as well. Keep up the great work. But I would like for all of us to pause, even if just for a moment, and reflect on, again, where would we like to see ourselves this time next year? Let's not let time get away from us, friends. Let's turn those strategic plans into action plans and make that magic happen. But until next time, friends, turn your to-do list into a to-da list. Take care and keep smiling.
Wow.